Okay, so let's start looking at the three cases that Rachels talks about in this chapter. Now, the first case is a case from 1993 that he calls Baby Teresa. I think that was the popular name for it in the press at the time. So, the case facts that he reports to us is that Baby Teresa, right, is born with ancephaly. And ancephaly is a developmental disorder, and it results when babies actually make it to birth in important parts of the brain, especially the cerebrum and the cerebellum, but also related body parts such as the skull and the scalp to be missing. So they're often missing the top of their skull. The brain stem, however, is still there, and that's what regulates our metabolic functionings. And so these babies, if they make it to birth, usually can breathe and possess a heartbeat. However, their prognosis is usually, almost without exception, absolutely awful. They never live for more than a few days. And the reason why is that encephaly is a gestational birth defect that's part of a class of birth defects called neural tube defects. And neural tube defects, the parts of the brain during gestation that start to develop from in the embryo, don't develop properly. And so the embryos don't develop a complete or proper nervous system. Now, neural tube defects are some of the most common birth defects. They are estimated to affect about 300,000 births worldwide each year. Now, in the United States, most cases of encephaly, which is one type of a neural tube defect, are detected usually during pregnancy, and most oftentimes the fetus is aborted as a result of the detection of this birth defect. Those that aren't, about half of them are stillborn, so they don't actually get born live. And that leaves about 350 each year in the United States that are born alive, biologically alive, but they die usually within a couple of days. Now, current scientific opinion about encephaly is that encephalics are deaf, they're blind, and they're unconscious. And there's really nothing that can be done to improve or extend their lives. So this is the situation that baby Teresa has. Now, Rachel tells us that she was never conscious. She never exhibited any signs of being conscious. She would die soon. That's the prognosis for babies like this. And that her parents wanted to allow baby Teresa's organs to be transplanted so that she could be an organ donor and thereby save other babies. However, her organs were going to deteriorate too much to be viable transplant organs if the doctors waited for Teresa to actually have her biological or natural death. So in order to harvest the organs, baby Teresa would have to actually be killed biologically, even though mentally she isn't conscious. She doesn't hear, she doesn't see, she doesn't have feelings, desires, hopes, and so on. She's missing basically most of her brain. So Rachel's asked us the following case question with regard to baby Teresa. And that case question is, should Teresa be killed so that her organs could save others? Right? Should we do this, or is it morally permissible, or is it morally right to kill baby Teresa, harvest her organs so that we can save other babies? And there's our case question. So now Rachel gives us arguments for and against answering that case question in the affirmative, that is, harvesting her organs for transplant. So the first argument that Rachel looks at is an argument for performing that operation, that is, using baby Teresa as an organ donor, even though it will result in her biological death. And the argument that he gives, he entitles the benefits argument. And the benefits argument starts off with a principle. And that principle says, look, in general, if we can benefit someone without harming anyone else, then we ought to do so. So, in other words, this principle tells us, as a general rule, if our actions can result in benefiting someone without causing harm to someone else, then we ought to perform those actions. So we have this general principle as our first premise. And we have our second premise. And the second premise essentially describes baby Teresa's case. Transplanting her organs will benefit other children, probably save lives. And Rachel says it won't harm baby Teresa in the sense that she's already destined to die. She is not conscious. She doesn't have feelings. She can't hear, see, smell. She doesn't have desires or goals. She doesn't really have most of her brain. And so he describes it as we're not going to be harming baby Teresa as the premise for this argument. And from these two premises, then, this argument derives the following conclusion, suggests the following conclusion, that we ought to transplant baby Teresa's organs, even though that operation for harvesting her organs is going to result in her biological death, because waiting longer on this view would result in her death without benefiting anyone else, and performing the operation won't cause her harm while benefiting other people. So what's the evaluation that Rachel gives to this argument? Rachel seems to think this argument is a sound argument. It's a valid, deductive argument with true premises in his assessment. And so why does he have this assessment of this argument? Well, he argues or suggests that harvesting Teresa's organs doesn't actually harm her. It doesn't cause her harm. Since she only has what he calls a mere biological existence. That is, she is alive, but she's alive sort of in the way that we think of plants being alive, germs being alive, bacteria being alive. She's biologically alive, but she's not conscious. She doesn't have hopes, desires, goals, dreams. She has no sensations. And so Rachel wants to suggest that her existence has no intrinsic value. We're not depriving her of anything of intrinsic value by ending her biological existence, because it is just that. It's a mere biological existence. Now, the next argument that we're going to look at in the next segment is an argument against performing that operation. And that argument is going to be called the argument that we should not use people as means. So we'll pick that up in the next segment.